Hi and welcome to Poly Originals with Fiona Abel-Smith. For some time now I have just loved looking at all the different images online of what is called fractals and fractal art, and I just love the patterns that they make and I find them very inspiring. I'm not a mathematician, I'm not a scientist, and I know there's a lot of both of those involved in having designs like this which are found in nature. It's the Fibonacci sequence of these spirals and how they go down, the fact that this is a duplication of all the different repeating patterns getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. When it comes to polymer clay and canes, I didn't want to go into that much detail, and obviously when you're creating canes by yourself it's quite difficult to go into that much detail. However, I just love the swirls, I love the colours, and I just thought I wanted to have a go. So I've gone for a very basic fractal cane. When I was having a mess around a few weeks back, I made this base fractal cane and I got so many comments that people said, can you please do it for us as a tutorial? However, it's really quite complex, so it's quite difficult to do as a step-by-step tutorial. So what I've done is I've recreated this cane almost exactly as I've got it here, and I've done that in a way that's fast forwarded, but you can follow what I'm doing so you can create one for yourself if you want. And I started by making myself a little mock-up, just a very rough drawn diagram of this in a bigger form, and then I copied the colours of my original cane to create something very similar. Once we have our base fractal, and all I've done is made sure there's a swirl in it, but also this tiny little bit is just reminiscent of the echoes you get in those, whether you've got the smaller reductions of the same pattern in that as well. So a swirl and then some smaller bits. And I make this in quite a big size, so it's this size when I make it. I then reduce it down, and then what we do is we change the shape of this, add some extra elements in, and you end up with a pattern where you've got similar bits of the same pattern, then reducing down in size, reducing down in size. So you've got those reductions, but of course, being polymer clay, I've put it together in a kaleidoscope form. That's not particularly relevant to fractals or fractal art, but it is of course relevant to polymer clay and how we do our cane work. So this is just one of many patterns I show you, most of which are based on this base cane. So I'll give you the equipment you need to make the cane, and the additional equipment we do to make this nice pendant, and all you need to do is just thread a piece of cord through there and you'll be away and finished. I'll talk roughly about the clay I'm using, and then as I say I will fast forward through most of the preparation for this. Once I have my base cane made, I then slow it all down and take you through all the different steps you need to go from a base cane into making something with repetitions, and I do 3 different varieties for this base cane and also show you with a completely different cane how you could make your own fractal cane without using a base cane like this. Because there's lots of different elements to this tutorial, I have put a listing of all the different sections, so if you just wanted to skip ahead to see a particular thing, you can do. So some of you might just want to sit back, relax, settle down and watch as we fast forward through. Others of you obviously may want to slow it all down, and don't forget you can, on your settings, slow the speed down by changing the speed, play speed, so you can see in more detail what I'm doing for the base cane. But either way, hopefully just relax, enjoy, and see what we end up with at the end of this tutorial. The equipment we need is fairly standard. I work on a large tile, but any size tile is good to work on. Anything that's got a nice, flat, non-porous surface will work well for polymer clay. You'll need a polymer clay blade. I often refer to these as tissue blades, which is what we call them in the UK. A craft knife always comes in handy. A roller of some kind, and I use both this one to roll things, and I also use a brayer roller a couple of times as well. It comes in handy. But if you haven't got one of these, just an ordinary roller will do. I'm using a small 4mm cable needle, and I use this where the cane slices join together just to persuade them to join each other together. A couple of cocktail sticks, one whole, one broken. If you're making a pendant like this, so I've got just a small piece of clay, I will put it on something like this, which is a small piece of baking parchment. I think it's the silicone paper, and I just find it easy to move that around. But a piece of wax paper, tracing paper, baking paper, anything like that will work just as well. And on that I also use a piece of the wax paper, a larger piece, so that when I've got my pieces finished I can smooth over them with the roller or with something like the stainless steel soap as a burnishing tool. But if you haven't got one of these, then the roller works fine. But using this over clay, having the sheet of paper, which is see-through, just stops this pressing into or smearing any clay over the top of your veneer. If you are making this, then you'll need some form of domed mould. This is just a semicircular sphere which you can buy online, and these sit nicely over the top when we're baking. As I mentioned before, I'm going to be working to a pattern. This is the one I've done. If you want to do something similar, then just take a screenshot of it and create your own. This is simply marked out on a piece of paper, and I've just got a piece of acetate on top so I can work on and put the clay straight on this without marking the paper, so I can use it multiple times. You will need some liquid clay. I've just decanted mine into a little pot just for ease of use, rather than have it in the big bottle. If you don't have any liquid clay, then for what we're doing today, just attaching the bail to the back, a little bit of PVA glue would work absolutely fine. To put the tiny bit of sparkle in the back, I've just got some of these chatons. I believe these are 4mm, and I will put a link to where I get them from in the UK. You can buy them from most good craft jewellery stores around the world. When I finish my piece, this one I have sanded and buffed rather than varnished, and I will use wet dry sandpaper in 240 grit up to 2000, and I'll go into more details on that later on when I get to this stage. To create the bail on the back, I'm using one of these bail templates, and this is the one I've used for today. These are available from PC UK Tools, and I'll put a link to where you can get those from in the video description below. They make great bails for your pieces. When I'm working, certainly measuring my cane or just working generally, I will often work on one of these measuring sheets, which I've just laminated. And this one is freely downloadable from www.printablepaper.net. And this is the 4 squares to 1 inch one, but you can download centimetres instead if you would prefer to work in centimetres. You'll also need some cling film or some plastic wrap if you're going to make the pendant. And when we bake, I always tent my pieces in aluminium foil just to protect the clay should the oven spike during baking. Other than this, I use biodegradable wet wipes to clean my hands and the machinery as I go along, and some just ordinary plain tissues to dry things off, and I use a pasta machine dedicated to polymer clay use for making the thin sheets we need. However, if you don't have a pasta machine, you can always stack layers of playing cards, the same amount on either side, and then roll your clay in between them, and that'll give you a nice thickness of clay, and you can make yours that way instead. So I think that's it on the equipment front. So let's start straight away and move on to making that base cane. To make the cane, I'm using Fimo Soft, but all well-known and recognised brands of polymer clay will work equally well for doing a cane like this. So what I've done, I've just set out all my colours, and I've found that doing it in separate colours just gives you a different look to doing a skinner blend for this particular one. So they're all set out in 1/2 ounce or 14 gram blocks, and I've started with my main colour of blue and yellow and red, and then just added extra colours to make a lighter version and a darker version, and the same down to almost white, to orange, to a light red, and then up to a deep red. And I'll mix all of these up together and condition the clay into these nice separate individual colours, and then I'll just take blobs of these colours and I'll push them together to give us our nice swirls around in the pattern. So I'll be starting with lighter colours and then just adding swirls all the way around and doing the same with this one. For these bits in the middle, I'm going to use the blue and the yellow, wrap it in some of the dark blue, and then just make round blobs to go in that bit. And on this one we'll have some of the red in the round blobs, and then the yellow, and then the blue again. And these lines will just mark a line. I'm going to use this colour, and I will simply take very thin strips, and when I've got the swirls in place, first this one and then that one, I will, with my tissue blade, bend the blade and cut down through the finished cane and insert a thin stripe of this to get that stripe. So as I said before, I'm not going to go step by step through this particular cane because it is quite complex, but for those of you who are quite experienced in polymer clay, you can just follow and watch, and I'm sure you'll be able to do it just by watching what I do. But the important bit with this is when we get to the end and we've got our base cane, how we then change that, put it down into different shapes and use varying sizes of this to make effectively a sort of fractal cane. So as I say, sit back, relax, probably get a cup of tea or something, hopefully enjoy as I fast forward through until we've got this cane finished, and I've also reduced it down to a reasonable size. If you're new to things like conditioning clay or reducing clay, I will put a link to videos where I've got more details on this in the description below this video. So having finished with our base fractal cane ready, I'm going to reduce it down so I get several different repeating images but in smaller sizes, and then we'll put them all together to create a proper fractal cane where you've got say the multiple images in one design. I could leave it in the square, but I'm actually going to make it into a triangle. So the first thing I need to decide is which point is going to be the top of my triangle and which point is going to be the base. So I think for this one I'll keep this as the top and that as the base. So all I need to do is sort of put that bit so the blue's flat on the bottom and then just rock it slightly. And then I'll just start pressing that down with my fingers. You will always get the distortion here because obviously I've pushed a corner completely flat, but that's fine. We can just chop off anything that's too badly distorted. You can push these out slightly as well and pull them longer. And then in the same way as we did reducing the whole cane down, I will simply reduce this, continually turning it, pushing in whilst pulling it longer until we end up with a nice equilateral triangle. So say I'll chop off those bits to start with and then I'll reduce it down, and we're looking until the triangle gets probably to about 1 inch across, 2.5 centimetres, and that's where we'll take our first piece, see how much length we've got, and then start reducing it down to get decreasing pieces. Once I've got it down to the width I want, then I will chop off probably about 1/3. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, nearly 6. So let's go to 2 inches, 5 centimetres. That will be our first piece. And then I'm going to carry on and keep reducing it down. So I'll reduce it down probably until I've got 4.5 inches. So what's that, about 10, 11 centimetres, and then take off another 2 inches, and then keep going down till I've got probably 4 or 5 pieces in decreasing sizes. So I'll speed through that, but you'll see what I'm doing as I take it down to the smaller sizes. So having got the 5 sizes, you could put them together just as triangles, but I quite like to add a little bit of an extra curve in there again, just to add a little extra something in there. So where at the top of this red part, I'm just going to curve it slightly back, not a lot, just a little bit over. So I'm not even going to extend it much, just pull it slightly out more, but just give it a little bit of a curl over. And I'm going to do exactly the same on all 5 pieces. So I know if I put it that way up, so I've got the white or the yellow to the bottom and the red to the top. I can put them all down in exactly the same way that I know I'm pulling the red up and away from me. So for this first one, I'm going to separate them out and add a little background of plain black, because a lot of the patterns you see with fractals have got quite a dark background, so I think the black will go quite nicely and highlight the brighter colours. So I've just conditioned my clay. That's for 1/2 ounce, 14 grams of black clay. I've conditioned it and just rolled it into a ball. And now I'm just rolling it into a sausage, and again it'll be decreasing sizes, so whatever size I start off with the inside of this one, I'll then go thinner and thinner and thinner as I go down the lengths. And I'll just literally pop in a little round there, curl that over slightly, and then start on the next one. And now I've got some extra black and it's time to start putting them all together. So we'll start putting them together, and I am just going to place them so that they're roughly the same way around. Just have a look as we're going. So you can just put them wherever you want to do, really. Let's put them so they're sort of going in a slight spiral. And then we'll pack that spiral out with some more black clay. It's just nice to keep the feature of the spiral going as we put the extra canes, and then we'll just take a little bit of the extra clay and just squash that down, just to put a little bit of black down there. And of course, whatever you do, each time you do it, it's going to be slightly different. Each time I do these, they're slightly different. And I would say just don't overthink it. Just put them together in a way that looks good to you, because we're about to kaleidoscope these, so however they go down together will end up looking quite good. So we've got that one down there, and then it's the normal thing, which part you want to be the top part of a triangle. So I think I will do this point, so I'm going to make mine sort of triangular along that way. So you do it by simply forcing it in, gently rolling. So I know I want this bit to be the point, and I'm just going to gently pull those pieces down till they automatically start to create a flatter bottom piece. When it starts to go, you can pull up and then concentrate where you think the next part of the triangle will go. So I'll put that on there, which will leave that little black line being the third part. And now, in the same way as we reduced our original cane, we will reduce this down into a nice equilateral triangle. And again, I'll probably go to about 1 inch across, but this time because we're making this exact to make into a veneer or little hexagons to see what patterns we've got, I will concentrate on making sure that every side is exact, because the neater you make this cane, the easier it is to put your slices together. Okay, there we go. So I've got it as exact as I can make it. Don't know whether you could see there, but at times I wasn't just pulling it long, but when I was getting towards the end to make sure it was neat, if it's, for instance, if there's a little piece here where it's not quite wide enough, you can actually push it shorter just to make sure it's a really nice even length all the way across. So we will cut off the distorted end. So the next thing I need to do is to take some slices, and I'm just going to take 6 to start with, make a little hexagon, which I'm going to make into a pendant, so I'll show you how to do that. And then once I've done 6 and put it together in one pattern, because this is a kaleidoscope and we've got 3 different sides to our triangle, I'll do 2 more to show you the 3 different patterns that we get from this particular cane. So when you're taking slices, it's always slightly difficult for me to show when I'm doing a video, because I tend to put my head right over the top of the cane so I can easily see down both sides, and I do it from the back towards me, cutting slices down and taking them. Do whatever feels natural to you. There's no right or wrong to doing this, just do whatever suits you. Thickness wise, it's far more important to get consistent slices than thin or thick slices. Obviously the thinner you can go consistently the better, because the further it means that your cane will last and the more veneer that you can create. So I'll probably do about sort of 2 millimeters thick if I can. So I'll take a couple of slices and I'm going to go away from the camera, because generally the ones I take on camera aren't as neat as I can take when I'm looking carefully over the top. As we used black as the background in our cane here, I've taken a bit of black, conditioned it, put it through a medium setting of my pasta machine, so setting number 3 on mine, and then I will put it nice and neatly down, rolling it to make sure there's no air bubbles trapped underneath, just onto a piece of, this is just a little piece of silicone baking sheet, just so I can move this piece around as I want to. And then it's a case of just taking your slices and starting to put them together. Decide which way you want them to be, which corner you want to put together first. So let's do this bit being the inside to start with. So put 2 pieces together, and then your third, Just making sure the patterns match. With the blunt side of your blade, keeping your fingers well away from the sharp side, just neaten up or straighten up, because my triangles there weren't quite symmetrical, so they need to be straightened. And then you can sit those gently onto your black background, and then line up the first one of your slices so you know which way to put these ones together. Do the same again. And then you can pick this up, fold it back if you need to align those slices, and you start to see the pattern come together. So we need to neaten this up slightly. So I can see here, the great thing about doing hexagons is that these two lines should always be parallel, and the same with those, and the same with those. And as you can see, mine are slightly out. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to very gently, with again the blunt side of my blade, just push those back to neaten them up. And the same again here, just push back, just to straighten it. So we get more of an even hexagon shape, and just carry on going around, gently doing that until you've got the sides nice and neat. Take your cable needle or what other tool you're using, and gently, so with this bit, so I'm not using the point, I'm using the flat bit, I'm just going to roll the sides together until you get a nice clean joint in the middle. And what you're looking for is to roll it to such an extent that you cannot see that there is a join there. But it's very gentle. I'm sort of only barely touching it really. I'm not pressing down at all. Just persuading the slices to sit next to each other nice and gently. When you've got all that done, I will normally take the roller and just from the flat edge, just roll from the outside edge to the middle, because you're not getting any distortion by doing that. And do that the whole way around. Then I'll have another roll right over the top. Make sure it's nice and neat, and then I'll look again at those sides because they're still not quite right as far as I'm concerned. I want that to be slightly further in, and the same with that one. And what it does mean by doing a little hexagon first is I can go back and I can readjust my cane now, because it's obviously not quite symmetrical on all sides. So before I take any more slices, I can give it another adjustment. Quite often when we're making pendants and things and we're creating a pattern, we cut down through with the cutters and it gives a nice beveled edge, and you do that using a little bit of the cling film or the plastic wrap by putting it over the top nice and smooth, and then you cut down with your cutter. Obviously if you cut down the sides with a sharp polymer clay blade, it would chop straight the way through and you wouldn't get the beveled edge. However, if you have, like me, an older tissue blade, polymer clay blade, which has gone quite blunt, you can cover over and so protect the sharp part of the blade. I've just put some masking tape here, so I've masked it with a couple of layers, so I'm not going to cut my fingers. You can then use the blunt side of the blade to cut down through, or to effectively press down through just short of the edge. So can you see there I've gone a little bit over, and that will give you that nice domed edge which pulls the pattern down all the way down the side of your piece. If you tried doing it without this being masked, even if you keep your fingers well away, there is a tendency as you press down for this sharp blade to go into your finger. So please don't be tempted to do that. If you're going to use this, do mask the sharp bit of your blade. And then when you pull it all away, you should have a nice beveled side where the patterns have been drawn down. And then because it's on the baking sheet, you can just gently peel that away, and that will come off without any distortion whatsoever. And don't forget, still at this stage, if you're not 100% happy with how it looks, you can very gently just pull the shape to make it nice and neat and hexagonal. So that's one of our patterns. I'm going to go and chop another 12 slices. I'm going to reshape the cane first, chop another 12 slices and show you the other two patterns you can get from this same cane. So there are the 3 hexagon patterns. And as you can see, I've still got a lot of cane left. So I'm going to make these into pendants, and I'll show you how I do that next. And then at the end, when we finish doing all the patterns, I will make veneers of all of them for you, so you can see how they look when they're put together, not just in hexagons, but a big sheet of the triangular shapes all put together. So these need to be baked. And I will put them on top of one of these domed moulds. Whatever you've got is fine. Centre it up and very gently, hardly touching it, but just very gently pressing down so as not to leave any fingerprints or anything like that. Just adhere it to the top of the bowl. I will wrap the whole piece in a sheet of aluminium foil, a nice clean sheet, making sure it doesn't touch the top of that because I don't want the foil digging in to the pattern at all, and then bake according to the manufacturer's instructions for the brand of clay you are using. And when I bring you back, and I'll do all of them, I will then show you how I'm going to put a little bail on the inside of the back just to give us a nice neat finish. So here's our domed pendant, all baked and cooled. I'm going to sand and polish mine later and I'll show you what that looks like, but just for now I'm going to put the bail on the back. You can make bails in various ways, but I was very lucky and someone gave me for Christmas a set of these bail makers. Now these are the ones from PC UK, and I'll put a link to these below the video in the video description. They come like this. So far I've just been using the little pull-out ones, and I haven't even bothered to take the cover off because I'm just using black, but if I show you, this peels off. And then if you were using patterned clay, you could see exactly where to put it down to create the pattern. So all I'm going to do today, I'm just going to take one of these, and I'm using black clay because of course we've got the black on the back here, and I have found it easier, rather than chopping around the shape, use something like a cocktail stick just to press around, particularly with this one because it's very decorative with all a little scalloped edge. When you've gone the whole way down, and obviously I'm working on one of these sheets again, you can just peel that off, pop him back in where he's supposed to go, and the masking tape just holds him in place. And now you can very gently and carefully with your craft knife go around and cut out all the shapes. And there you have your nice scalloped shape. Peel your shape off, and I break a cocktail stick in half just so it holds it open, and I'm just going to fold that back so it sits neatly on itself. Now obviously these are meant to be used so they'd sit around the top of your piece so you'd have a decorative bail, but I want this one hidden on the back and they work equally well for this. So you've got your little shape there. Have a look at your piece, decide which way you want it to go up, whether you want it to be flat at the top or whether you want one of the points at the top. I think I want that point at the top. I'll get a little bit of liquid clay. If you don't have liquid clay, then PVA glue would work just as well for that. And then I'm just going to sit him nicely in the middle. And this is where having that cocktail stick in means I don't have to worry that I'm going to press it too much, because I know I'll always have a channel there to go through. And then because it's scalloped edge, I just like to press down where those scalloped bits are, just to create more of a pattern. If it moves slightly on the liquid clay, that's fine, just press it back down. And then with the cocktail stick, I just move the lines up. So take a bit of time, make sure you've got it back down nicely, make sure the cocktail stick is level, give it a bit of a twist to make sure you've got a nice channel. And then one final thing I like to do, just create a little bit of a divot in there, and I will get one of the little shiny crystals. These are the ones with the pyramid backs, so it'll sit nicely in there. Just pop it into the hole, press that down in so it's flush with the clay, and if it sits deep enough into the clay, such as it is there, you shouldn't even need to re-glue that once you have baked. So I'll just give it another little push or twist with the cocktail stick, make sure it's not showing at all on the front when you turn over, and then I will sit it, this time bake it on the inside of the bowl so you've got the domed shape on the inside, and as before cover that and bake according to the manufacturer's instructions for the brand of clay you are using. So there's our piece out of the oven, and so the little chaton there has stayed in because I pushed it so far in so it doesn't need to be glued in. Just add a little bit something on the back. And I have sanded and polished this, and so that's how it comes out when it's sanded and polished. That's obviously compared to one that hasn't been. And you could just varnish this or put resin on the top, whatever else you wanted to use. I use the wet dry sandpaper, and we've got 240 grit, 600 grit, 1000, 1500 and 2000, and you start with the coarsest and work your way up. And I will do it in a bowl of water with a little bit of detergent in there. Always wear rubber gloves because you don't want to scratch yourself with the sandpaper, and then that's what you get when you've sanded it. And I polish it on a buffing wheel, which is just on a bench grinder with a nice unstitched cotton polishing mop on the end. So I've taken another cut off from the original base cane and put it down into 5 decreasing sizes. And this time I pressed down on this top corner, so I flattened off this bit. And that's the pattern we end up with that. And I've kept a little bit off to one side so I can show you this kaleidoscoped by itself. But in the meantime, we're going to do another fractal cane with these pieces. And this time, rather than just do a plain background, I've done a Skinner blend for the background. So this has gone from the brilliant blue, which is already in the cane itself. I've gone through aqua and then down into mint, and that size. So again, 1 part the brilliant blue, 1 part aqua, 2 parts mint, and that gives us this nice blend here. So in total, again, that's ½ ounce, 14 grams of clay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that back through the pasta machine, fold it over, put it through dark end, put it through to its thinnest usable settings to get myself my nice long thin strip, and I'm going to concertina it from one end up to the other. So I'll bring you back when I've got that done. And what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to put it into a point, and I'm going to reduce this in a triangular shape. So when it's about half the width of the base of this one across, I will chop off a piece the same length. And then I'll repeat, getting smaller and smaller until I've got down to half the length of all of these in the same way. I'm going to make a slight swirl in this side going away from this blue here. And again, I've put them all the same way, so I know that the curl's going to be going away from me. And then I'm going to do the same on the blue, curling the blue towards the mint in one direction. And then you can fit the 2 curled shapes in together and pull them down. So that sits on top, but it's interlinked. And I will do that for all 5 pieces. And having done that, it's just a case of figuring out a way to put them together. Now, in the first one, I put them together in decreasing sizes going around in a circular pattern, but you really don't have to do that. So for this one, I'm going to go just make it up as I go along, so I've got no idea what's going to come out. But that is the fun bit. That is what makes it interesting to do. So I'll put that one over there. So they're going to spin around like that. So let's put him. Put him sort of slightly in there, and then because I've gone almost triangular shape, let's come and put him with the blue to the outside down there. Okay, so as I say, I've got no idea how this is going to come out. Same with all the others, but what we'll do is, as before, we will simply push that into a triangular shape, get it all the way down to a nice even size, and then I'll create the 3 hexagonal patterns for you. So I won't bother taking you all the way through this. I will just get the hexagons done and bring you back when I have got them finished. So there you go. Those are the 3 hexagons you get from that particular pattern, and it does give you a completely different look with that much lighter background. and just do whichever you prefer. And as before, I've got quite a nice amount of the cane left, so I will make that up into a veneer for you to show you the complete pattern and how it looks if you make a veneer. So let's try something else. So for the final bit, we're going to keep a cane in more of a square shape to start with, and I'm going to do something slightly different with this one, because I noticed that when you take your cut and if you put it that way up, because of where the blue is on both these sides, it gives you that nice, almost sort of like interlocking pattern. So I've just cut off a piece. So I'll reduce it in a square shape but make it more of an oblong when we get down to smaller sizes, and I'll probably only do 3 of these, 2 that'll match up in that way I just showed, and then a smaller one, and we'll see if we can get those to go into a triangle. And I'll probably put some little bit of background in. I might well just put a bit more black in again, just so we get an idea of how the pattern comes out, just to show you something else to do. So first things first, let's reduce this down in a square shape. Okay, so I've put them together, as you can see, in a slightly weird shape, but I've got the blue all intermingling in the middle there, which I thought would look quite nice. So I've got a couple of gaps here, so I'm just going to put a bit of black, a couple of black triangles in there, and then we will reduce this down as a triangular shape and just see what we get. And as before, I'm just going to take what looks to me to be a normal sort of point and make this the point of the triangle, that the flat side, and we'll just, as I say, see what we get. So having pushed it into the triangular shape, I will do as we've done before. I will get this reduced down and I will take 18 slices to show you the different patterns that makes in the little hexagon shape. And that's how that pattern comes out. And again, I've got enough length here that I can do the full veneer for you. Now I must admit, I'm really loving those ones, and I'm wishing I'd tried that way of doing it before now. So it just goes to show you, just have an experiment, just sort of mess around, put things together, try slightly different ways. But I was really thinking with these ones how the fractal canes would interact, so how the blues would all sort of be part of it, and then you get the patterns swirling. And I think that's starting to get closer to the idea of the fractal pattern of all the ones that I've done so far. So that of course was using a base cane which was done particularly for creating this pattern. But what if you don't want to do that as base cane? You just have another base cane. How would that work, and how would you get it to go together to form a fractal cane? So if you've got a cane that already has a spiral in it, and this is one of the ones I was practicing when I was doing a Skinner blend, so this one is actually easier than the one I did for you today. This is just Skinner blend pushed into a large triangular shape, obviously length of it, repeat on the other side, and then just pushed into this spiral shape with a little bit of the swirls in between. If you've got something, say, that's already got a spiral in, then as before, if you push that down into a triangular cane, if you take lots of cut-offs and then add little swirls of black in, as we did for that one, you could get a pattern like that. If you add the mix of the blues, a nice Skinner blend like we did for that, then you can get a pattern like that. So it's fun just to experiment and see what you get with different canes. But you may have a cane that doesn't have a swirl in it. So here's leftover ends of a cane, and this cane has, as you see, no swirl in it, but there is a place if we push up here where we could create a swirl. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press this thinner at the bottom, and because it's easier to show you with the plain, I'm just going to do this in black. Once we've got a nice height with my roller, I'm going to press the roller down in the side so we can curl that over, create a groove. Where we can sit a bit of black. Let's just pop that in there. So we do now have some swirls, but if we push that slightly more triangular in shape and chop it in half, we could perhaps repeat the pattern by pushing down like that to create more of those swirls. Let's just add a little bit more black just in this mid bit here, and then we'll push that down and see what we've got as a cane like that. A little flattened black just in there. So that would then be our base cane. But because we've got quite a lot of black in this, I'm not going to make this too small. I'm probably only going to do 3 differing sizes, because of course we've already got 2 versions of the same pattern in there when we cut the cane in half to start with. Let's chop off a piece. We'll have a quick look and see what we're going to get. You can see we're going to start getting some nice patterns in there. So that's one. So I'll just make this one slightly smaller. And because the pattern's already quite small, I don't want to go too small in these pieces, otherwise you won't see any of the pattern left over. And whilst to a certain extent that's the whole point of a fractal, that you don't see but you know it's there, the smaller and smaller and smaller sizes, we want to see a little bit of it. So having got those, let's find a way to put them together which will give us a nice repeat of the pattern. So I'm just going to pull that over there, and this little bit. Let's just put him in there. And as per usual, let's just force ourselves into a triangular shape. So we've got swirls, we've got a repetition of pattern in decreasing sizes, although this wasn't in any way, shape or form meant to be a fractal cane to start with. So let's just see what happens. So I'll just chop a little bit off just at the end so we can start to see what sort of pattern we're going to get, and I'll reduce that down until we get it into the shape and show you the 3 hexagons as normal. And that's how those patterns come out. Now obviously you can see there it's really gone quite small, the pattern, because the pattern I started with had a lot of detail in it. So if you started with something which had much less detail in the initial cane, just put a couple of spirals in and then put it down, then you'd end up with a nice sort of fractal look to any cane ends that you've got left over. With our initial cane, which we made these ones out of, which look like that with the extra black bits in, that creates a veneer that looks like that. This veneer is made by taking 24 slices of the triangles and putting them together to create the patterns as they meet. And if you added an extra 30 around the outside, so 54 pieces in total, you could go bigger again and obviously expand even more if you wanted to. If you're unsure how to do this pattern, I do it in detail in the circuit cane tutorial, and I will put a link to that in the video description below. This was the second one we did with the additional little blue Skinner blend, and it created that cane. So the veneer that one does comes out like that. And for this one, where we made the squares, the 3 squares together and put them together in a triangular form and created those hexagons, that one, if you take lots of slices, comes out to a veneer like that. And in this one I have gone for the full 54 slices all the way around, because the cane was smaller on this one. I'd put it down to a smaller size. And And finally, we'll just go back to the base cane itself. So if you remember, I was chopping pieces of this off and pushing them down into triangles. The second one I did, I pushed down on the blue side, and we ended up with a triangle like that. Well, if you put that together in hexagons, you get those 3 patterns. And the first one I did, we made the red side the triangle point and pushed the blue side flat. And if you take a piece off and do it in that direction and only put together this base cane, then you get that pattern as a veneer. So even as a base cane just by itself, this one comes out quite nicely when you put it together in the hexagons and kaleidoscope it. So having done the one base fractal cane, I sort of quite liked it, so I couldn't resist doing another one. So I decided this time to go for yellows, blues and greens. So these are the colours I used. And here's how this one turned out. I didn't concentrate on keeping it exactly the same as the red, yellow and blue one, as I wasn't bothered whether it changed very slightly in this one. So the orientation is slightly different, and I carried the Skinner blend on right the way down the side, and there wasn't so much sort of down here at the bottom. So it came out slightly differently, but I still put it together in hexagons and came up with a couple of pendants, and this is how they came out. So they've got the little chaton on the back again, so the green one this time, and they've just been sanded and polished. And I must admit, I quite liked how they came out. So I have been working on some bowls, because I'm going to do a bowl tutorial coming up in a few weeks' time. So this is one of the bowls I made using that cane. It's decorated on the front and the back. And here's another one with a greener background, and then the back decoration on the back. So again, so much you can do with these canes, whether it's the base fractal cane or whether it's the fractal designed canes with the repetition. So I think that's about it. We started with our base cane, added some black background to make a fractal cane, made ourselves a little pendant. We then experimented putting a Skinner blend in the background, and then we made it into a square cane and pushed that down in to get our individual shapes. As I've mentioned all the way through, I haven't approached this from a mathematically correct or even a scientifically correct point of view. I'm simply looking at the patterns that fractals create, which is what inspired me in the first place, and taking those basic elements of a spiral and a repetition in decreasing sizes and created a cane from that. And I hope you've enjoyed watching it and take the time to experiment and have a go yourself. As always, thank you so much for watching. Particular thank you to those of you who subscribe. I really do appreciate it. Okay, I'm off to have a rest. I think I'm a bit fractaled out, and hopefully I'll see you next time. Thanks so much for watching. Bye for now. Bye.